You can always tell who they came to celebrate and who they came to watch fall. The chandelier light spilled across the ballroom in soft gold, catching the edges of crystal glasses and polished shoes. But when Emily Carter stepped through the doors, the glow seemed to hesitate, like even the room needed a second to decide what to do with her. Conversations didn't stop, not completely, but they shifted, bending into quiet murmurs that traveled faster than any music playing overhead, and somewhere near the bar, a woman let out a small laugh that wasn't meant to be heard. Except it was, and it echoed louder than it should have, as if the walls themselves carried it further. Emily didn't rush, didn't shrink. She moved at her own pace, one step at a time across marble floors that reflected every movement, her heels steady, her posture straight, her hand lightly holding her clutch as if it weighed nothing at all. A server passed by with a tray of champagne flutes, hesitating just long enough to glance at her dress. Simple, understated, not wrong, just not belonging to this kind of night. And then he moved on without offering a glass. Across the room, Daniel Brooks stood near the center of attention, laughter easy on his face, one arm draped casually around a woman who sparkled in ways Emily did not. And when his eyes finally found her, there was no surprise there, only recognition wrapped in something colder, something rehearsed, like he had expected this moment and had already decided how it would go. The music swelled, a polished orchestral piece, filling the air, but beneath it, there were other sounds, quieter, sharper, the faint click of someone whispering behind a glass, the soft intake of breath from a stranger who realized who she was. The subtle shift of bodies turning just enough to watch without being obvious. Emily paused near the edge of the dance floor, not stepping into the light, not hiding from it either, just existing in that thin space where presence becomes statement, and for a second, just a second, her reflection, caught in the mirrored wall behind the band, a version of her that didn't flinch, didn't fold, didn't ask for permission to be there. Somewhere, a voice mispronounced her name, introducing her as if she were a footnote, someone from a past that no longer mattered, and a ripple of amusement followed, light, dismissive, easy. Emily didn't correct them, didn't turn, didn't offer a smile to soften the edges. She simply stood there, still as the music wrapped around the room, her gaze steady, her silence deliberate, as if she were listening for something no one else could hear yet, something just beneath the surface of the melody, waiting for the exact moment it would all change. The music carried her backward before she even moved, the soft rise of strings brushing against something older than the room itself, and for a fleeting second Emily could almost feel the weight of a different night pressing against her chest. A night where the same melody had meant promise instead of performance. The memory did not arrive in full, it never did anymore, just fragments stitched together by sound. A white dress catching late afternoon light, Daniel's hand warm around hers, the way he had leaned in as if the world had narrowed down to a single quiet vow that only the two of them could hear. She remembered the applause more than the words, the way people had stood then, not out of obligation but out of belief, and how she had believed it too. Completely, without hesitation, without the instinct to guard herself. The present shifted again as someone brushed past her shoulder, a whisper trailing behind them, not cruel enough to confront, just sharp enough to leave a mark. And she let it pass through her like background noise, the way she had learned to let so many things pass over the years. Her fingers adjusted slightly around her clutch, not tightening, not trembling, just grounding, as if reminding herself of where she stood now, not where she had been. Across the room Daniel laughed again, louder this time, the kind of laughter that invited others to join, and they did, because it was easy, because it cost nothing to stand beside someone who appeared to have everything. Emily's gaze did not follow him for long. Instead it drifted to the band, to the pianist whose hands moved with practiced precision, each note placed exactly where it belonged, controlled, intentional, untouched by the undercurrent running through the crowd. It struck her then how different control felt when it was real, not performed, not borrowed from someone else's approval, but built quietly over time, piece by piece, in mornings no one witnessed and nights no one applauded, Another introduction echoed faintly behind her, her name said again, slightly off, as if it did not quite matter to get it right, followed by a polite ripple of acknowledgement that never reached her, and she allowed the moment to settle without correction, without interruption, her silence no longer empty but deliberate, carrying its own weight. The music swelled higher, filling every corner of the room. Yet beneath it, Emily sensed the fragile edge of something waiting, something that did not belong to the rhythm everyone else was following, and she remained still, listening not to what was being played, but to what had not yet been heard. Emily did not move when Daniel finally began walking toward her, the shift in the room subtle but unmistakable as conversations bent around his path, making space for him the way they always had. As if the air itself recognized where attention was supposed to settle, his shoes echoed lightly against the marble, measured, confident, each step carrying the quiet assurance of someone who had never once doubted he belonged exactly where he stood. And when he stopped a few feet in front of her, there was a pause, brief but intentional, long enough for nearby guests to turn just slightly, to listen without appearing to listen. His smile came first, polished and familiar, the same expression he used in photographs and business meetings, the one that revealed nothing while suggesting everything was under control, and his eyes followed a second later, scanning her in a way that felt less like recognition and more like evaluation, as if he were confirming something he had already decided. "Emily," he said, her name smoother this time, correct, but lacking warmth, and a few people nearby reacted to the sound of it, subtle glances exchanged, quiet curiosity sharpening into attention. She met his gaze without hesitation, not challenging, not welcoming, simply steady, the kind of stillness that did not ask for permission. "I was not sure you would come," he continued, his tone light enough to pass as casual, but carrying an edge that landed precisely where it was meant to, and somewhere behind him a soft laugh slipped out, quickly covered, but not entirely hidden. Emily let a second pass before responding, not out of uncertainty, but because she chose the timing. Because silence had become something she owned now, not something forced upon her, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, even untouched by the undercurrent surrounding them. "You sent an invitation," she said, "nothing more, nothing less." Daniel's smile shifted, just slightly, enough to reveal the intention beneath it, and he glanced briefly over his shoulder toward the crowd, as if drawing them into the moment without needing to say so. "Yes," he replied, "but not everyone understands where they fit anymore." The words delivered softly, almost kindly, yet they carried far, picked up by the listening edges of the room, and this time the reaction was clearer, a ripple of quiet amusement moving outward like a stone dropped into still water. Emily did not react the way they expected, did not lower her eyes or offer a defensive explanation. She simply held her place, her shoulders relaxed, her expression unchanged, and in that stillness there was something unfamiliar to the room, something that did not align with the narrative unfolding around her. The music continued to rise, elegant and controlled, yet beneath it the tension thickened, stretching between what was being said and what was being withheld, and as Daniel waited, as the crowd leaned in just enough to witness whatever would come next, Emily remained exactly where she was, not shrinking, not stepping forward, just present, as if she were waiting for a different signal entirely, something beyond the words, beyond the laughter, something only she seemed to anticipate. Daniel's words lingered just long enough to invite a response, but Emily gave him none, and that absence shifted something subtle in the air, like a note held too long before it resolves. He let out a small breath through his nose, almost a quiet laugh, as if amused by her refusal to follow the script he had set, and for a moment he seemed ready to say more, to press further, but instead he stepped back half a pace, turning slightly so the room could see them both, not as two people with a past, but as a contrast he intended to highlight. "Enjoy the evening," he added, lightly, as if offering kindness, though the tone carried just enough weight to land differently. And then he moved away, already greeted by another circle of attention that closed around him with ease. The music continued, elegant and uninterrupted, yet Emily felt its distance now, like it belonged to a space she no longer occupied. And she exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in release, as if letting go of something that had been expected of her the moment she walked in. She turned slightly, stepping away from the center, her heels softer now against the marble as she moved toward the edge of the room where the light dimmed just enough to blur the outlines of those watching. Near the bar, a server finally offered her a glass, this time without hesitation, and she accepted it with a small nod, her fingers steady as they wrapped around the cool stem. Grounding herself not in the room, but in the present, the reflections around her shifted as she moved, fragments of faces, chandeliers, and movement catching in mirrored surfaces, creating a version of the space that felt layered, almost unreal, and within it, she caught glimpses of herself not as the woman they whispered about, but as someone separate from their narrative entirely. The music softened briefly, transitioning into a slower piece, and with it came a memory not forced. Not sharp, but quiet and familiar, early mornings filled with the scent of coffee and the sound of a small voice calling her name. A rhythm of life built far from rooms like this, steady and real in ways no audience could measure. She took a small sip from her glass, not for comfort, but for pause, allowing the moment to settle without rushing to escape it, and as she lowered it again, her gaze lifted, not searching for Daniel, not drawn by the laughter that still flickered in distant corners, but toward the entrance she had walked through minutes earlier, as if expecting something or someone, not with urgency, but with certainty. The music rose again, smooth and controlled. Yet beneath it there was a faint hesitation, almost imperceptible, like a shift waiting to happen, and Emily stood there in that quiet edge of the room, composed, untouched, her presence no longer reacting, but aligning, as if the night had not yet reached the moment it was truly building toward, and she knew it. The entrance doors opened again, not with force, not with announcement, but with a quiet precision that did not ask for attention and somehow drew it anyway, a subtle shift in posture passing through the nearest guests first, then outward. Like a ripple that did not need sound to travel, Emily noticed it not because she was looking, but because the room changed, the rhythm of it bending just slightly off its previous course, conversations thinning, laughter pausing a fraction too long before continuing, and in that small disruption, she lifted her gaze. A man stepped inside, his presence composed rather than loud, dressed in a dark tailored suit that did not compete for attention, yet held it effortlessly, his pace unhurried. Each step measured as if he had nowhere else to be and no need to prove why he belonged. No one announced his name, but recognition moved through the room in fragments. A glance held a second longer, a quiet exchange between two executives near the bar, the kind of awareness that came from knowing influence without needing to speak it aloud. Emily watched only briefly before lowering her eyes again, not out of avoidance, but because she did not need confirmation, her stillness unchanged. Her focus anchored in something deeper than curiosity. Across the ballroom, Daniel's voice carried again, lighter now, wrapped in confidence, as he entertained the group gathered around him, unaware or perhaps unconcerned with the shift that had begun to thread its way through the evening. The music continued, polished and controlled, but there was a faint hesitation now, a barely perceptible delay between notes, as if even the musicians felt the change before understanding it. The man moved further into the room, pausing occasionally as others greeted him with quiet respect, not exaggerated, not performative, just enough to reveal that his presence held weight that did not need explanation. When his gaze finally lifted, it did not scan the room aimlessly, it moved with intention, crossing faces, spaces, reflections, until it found Emily standing near the edge of the light, and for a brief moment, everything else seemed to recede, the noise softening, the movement slowing, leaving only that single point of recognition. He did not approach immediately, did not interrupt the fragile balance of the moment, but there was something in the way he held her gaze, steady and unintrusive, that felt different from every other look she had received that night, not measuring, not dismissing, simply seeing. Emily did not react outwardly, did not shift her stance or adjust her expression, but something subtle settled within her, a quiet alignment, as if the invisible thread she had been waiting for had finally drawn taut. Around them, the evening continued, unaware of what had just begun, the music carrying on, the laughter attempting to reclaim its place, yet beneath it all, the atmosphere had changed, not dramatically, not yet, but in a way that could not be undone, and Emily remained where she was, composed and certain, as if she had known all along that this was the moment the night would begin to turn. He did not rush toward her, and that was the first thing that set him apart, because in a room where attention was chased and claimed, his restraint felt deliberate, almost unfamiliar, and as he moved closer, the space around him adjusted without resistance. Conversation softening, bodies shifting just enough to clear his path without making it obvious. Emily remained where she was, her posture unchanged, her gaze steady as he approached, and when he finally stopped beside her, there was no grand gesture, no immediate introduction, only a quiet presence that settled into place as naturally as if he had always been meant to stand there. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke, and in that silence there was no discomfort, only a shared stillness that seemed untouched by the tension threading through the rest of the room. "You came," he said at last, his voice low, even, carrying no surprise, only acknowledgement. And Emily turned her head slightly toward him, meeting his gaze fully now, the faintest shift in her expression suggesting recognition rather than reaction. "You said I should not stay in small rooms," she replied, her tone calm, almost reflective, as if repeating something that had settled into her long before tonight, and the corner of his mouth lifted just enough to suggest understanding, not amusement, not charm, but something quieter, something grounded. Around them, the music continued. But it felt distant now, like it belonged to a different layer of the evening, one that no longer dictated the rhythm of this moment, and a few nearby guests had begun to notice, their attention drifting not because of noise or spectacle, but because of the subtle gravity forming in this quiet exchange. He did not offer his arm, did not draw attention to their connection. Instead, he simply stood beside her, aligned without announcement, his presence neither shielding nor overshadowing, but reinforcing something that did not need to be explained. Across the room, Daniel's laughter faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough to reveal that he had noticed, his gaze flickering toward them before quickly returning to the conversation he was leading. Though the ease in his posture no longer held quite as firmly as before, Emily did not look in his direction, did not follow the shift, her focus remaining exactly where it was, steady and composed, as if the past had already been placed where it belonged. "Are you ready?" the man asked quietly, not as a question that demanded an answer, but as one that recognized a decision already made, and Emily allowed a single breath to pass before responding, her voice soft but certain. "I have been for a long time," and as she said it, the room seemed to hold its shape for just a second longer, unaware that the moment it had been building toward was no longer approaching, but already here. Daniel noticed it. This time, not as a passing distraction, but as something that refused to stay in the background, his voice tapering off mid-sentence as the rhythm of the room shifted once more noticeably now, more deliberately. And the group around him followed his gaze without being asked, their attention drawn across the ballroom toward the quiet alignment forming at its edge. The man standing beside Emily did not move to claim the moment, did not raise his voice or gesture for attention. Yet the subtle recognition spreading through the room began to gather weight, quiet conversations dissolving into watchful silence as one by one, guests started to understand who had just walked in, or more precisely, who had chosen to stand beside her. Daniel's expression held for a second longer than necessary, the practiced ease tightening just slightly at the edges before he recovered, a small smile returning as if nothing had changed, though the timing of it came just a fraction too late. He lifted his glass, turning back to his audience with renewed confidence. "Some people," he began again, his voice carrying clearly across the space, measured and smooth, Forget that not every invitation is meant as a welcome, and this time the reaction came faster. A few light laughs, a couple of nods, the kind of agreement that required little thought, only alignment with the person speaking. The words reached Emily easily, but they did not land the way they once might have, and she did not turn, did not acknowledge the direction they came from, her focus remaining steady, her presence unchanged. Beside her, the man simply listened, his posture relaxed, his gaze not fixed on Daniel, but aware. As if he understood the shape of the moment without needing to engage it directly. The music continued, but it felt thinner now, stretched between two centers of gravity, one loud and insistent, the other quiet and unmoved. And for the first time that evening, the balance between them did not feel certain. A few guests began to shift their positions, not dramatically, just enough to adjust their view, to see more clearly, curiosity replacing amusement in small, almost imperceptible ways. Daniel's laughter rose again, but it did not travel as far this time. Its echo softer, less certain, as if the room had begun to decide where its attention truly belonged. Emily remained exactly where she was, her stillness no longer interpreted as absence, but as control, and without a word, without a gesture, the moment Daniel had tried to define began to slip from his grasp, not taken, not challenged, simply outgrown. The shift completed itself not with a sound, but with the absence of one, because somewhere between Daniel's fading laughter and the tightening stillness of the room, the music faltered, a single note stretching too long before cutting off entirely. And for the first time that evening, silence did not feel empty, it felt deliberate. Heads turned instinctively toward the stage where the musicians paused, uncertain, their hands hovering just above their instruments as if waiting for a cue that had not come, and then it arrived, not from them, but from the man standing beside Emily as he stepped forward with calm precision, his movement unhurried yet unmistakably decisive. No announcement was made, no spotlight demanded. Yet attention followed him as naturally as breath, and when he reached the edge of the platform, someone from the event staff leaned in quickly, recognition flashing across their face before they handed him the microphone without question. Daniel's posture shifted. Again, more noticeably now, his glass lowering slightly as his focus locked onto the unfolding moment, the confidence he had worn all evening beginning to fracture at the edges, though he did not yet understand why. The man did not speak immediately, allowing the silence to settle fully, to expand until it filled every corner of the ballroom, replacing the noise that had once defined it, and when he finally did, his voice was measured, steady, carrying effortlessly without force. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, not as a formality, but as a statement that required no approval, "but I believe something has been misplaced tonight." A faint ripple moved through the crowd, confusion replacing amusement, curiosity sharpening into attention, and he turned his gaze, not toward Daniel, but toward Emily, standing exactly where she had been all along. "Recognition," he continued, his tone unchanged, "has a way of arriving late in the wrong rooms," and a few guests exchanged uncertain glances, the meaning not yet fully clear, but the weight of it undeniable. Daniel stepped forward now, just enough to reclaim presence, a polite smile returning to his face as he addressed the man with practiced ease. "I am not sure this is the appropriate time," he began, his voice controlled, though the room no longer responded to it the same way. But the man did not look at him, did not acknowledge the interruption. Instead, he extended his hand slightly toward Emily, not pulling her into the moment, but inviting it to center around her. "This evening," he said quietly, "is hosted by a company that no longer belongs to the person speaking for it," and the words did not land all at once. They moved slowly, deliberately, settling into the room with a clarity that silenced every remaining whisper, and somewhere in that stillness, the truth became impossible to ignore, not announced with force, but revealed with precision, and as every gaze shifted, not toward Daniel, but toward Emily, the balance of the night did not break. It simply changed hands. No one moved at first, as if the room itself needed a moment to understand what had just been said. the words settling slowly into polished floors and crystal light, and in that suspended silence, every glance shifted, not abruptly, but with quiet inevitability, turning away from where power had once been assumed and toward where it now stood without asking. Daniel's smile remained for a second too long, the kind that holds out of habit rather than certainty, and then it faded. Not dramatically. Just enough to reveal the space underneath, the calculation, the realization arriving piece by piece as the weight of the moment pressed in from every direction. Emily did not step forward immediately, did not rush to fill the space that had opened around her. She simply stood where she had always been, composed, unchanged, as if nothing external had granted her this moment, as if it had always belonged to her end. The room was only just catching up. The man beside her lowered the microphone slightly, his role complete without needing to expand on it, and the staff member who had handed it to him stepped back with quiet deference. The unspoken hierarchy of the evening rewritten without a single raised voice. A murmur began to form, softer than before, not laced with amusement, but with awareness, names exchanged in hushed tones, pieces of information aligning. And Daniel found himself no longer at the center of that movement, but outside of it, watching as attention slipped through his grasp without resistance, without confrontation, simply redirected. Emily took a single step forward then, not toward the stage, not toward Daniel, but along the edge of the space, her heels marking a steady rhythm against the marble, and the sound carried farther now in the absence of music, each step clear, deliberate, unhurried. She did not look at him as she passed within a few feet, did not offer acknowledgement or closure, because none was needed, her silence no longer a shield but a statement complete on its own. Daniel's gaze followed her, searching for something, a reaction, a hesitation. Anything that might anchor him back into the moment he had tried to control, but there was nothing there to hold on to, only distance growing with each step she took. At the entrance, she paused briefly, not to look back, but to allow the night to settle behind her. The lights, the whispers, the shifting balance all continuing without her presence to define them, and then she moved forward, crossing the threshold with the same quiet certainty she had carried all along. Behind her, the room remained still for a fraction longer before sound began to return. Tentative, reshaped, but different now, permanently altered by what had unfolded without spectacle, without force. Outside, the air felt open, untouched by expectation, and Emily stepped into it without hesitation, her expression calm. Her posture unchanged, not elevated by victory, not burdened by the past, simply aligned with herself in a way no room could grant or take away, and in the quiet that followed, there was no need for a final word, because everything that mattered had already been seen.